Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I am talking about My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. And I am really a fan of Sophie Kinsella. I've read several other books by her, and she is a lot of fun. She's one of the authors I really enjoy for a good time, for comedy. This one was not quite as comedic as some of her others, but I still had a good time once we hit about the halfway mark. I was really struggling in the beginning. So let me actually read you what the cover or the front cover says about what this book is about, because I feel like it is super spoilery, but since it's on the cover, I feel like we can talk about it. So, everywhere Katie Brenner looks, someone else is living the life she longs for, particularly her boss, Demeter Farlow. Demeter is brilliant and creative, lives with her perfect family in a posh townhouse, and wears the coolest clothes. Katie's life, meanwhile, is a daily struggle, from her dismal rental to her oddball flatmates to the tense office politics she's trying to negotiate. No wonder Katie takes refuge in not quite true Instagram posts, especially as she's desperate to make her dad proud. Then, just as she's finding her feet, not to mention a possible new romance, the worst happens. Demeter fires Katie. Shattered but determined to stay positive, Katie retreats to her family's farm in Somerset to help them set up a vacation business. London has never seemed so far away until Demeter unexpectedly turns up as a guest. Secrets are spilled and relationships rejiggered, and as the stakes for Katie's future get higher, she must question her own assumption about what makes for a truly meaningful life. So, here's kind of the issue I have with that. All of that stuff, that's basically the whole book. Very little happens beyond what is on that cover. And I actually found that super frustrating in this book because there just wasn't a lot of stuff that I wasn't prepared for. There's a couple things at the end, a couple twists, but for the most part, this book is exactly what the front cover says. Katie, who is also called Kat because she's trying to change her name and trying to be cool and be a Londoner, she's working in an office. We get a nice setup of her roommates are kind of awful. The politics in her office are kind of awful. She really wants to please her boss, Demeter, and Demeter is not being very pleasable. I would compare her a little bit to like the Devil Wears Prada boss, where she wants a lot of things, but she's not always like really good at giving in return. For different reasons than in the Devil Wears Prada, but like definitely not the kind of boss that you're getting buddy with and that's helping your career along. And anyway, so Demeter ultimately fires Katie for reasons, and Katie struggles to try to continue her life in London, but it doesn't work, so she returns to her family farm. Now, her dad has always been a dreamer. He's always been trying to make these businesses, and his newest idea is a thing called glamping, which is glamorous camping. They have a farm. He thinks he's going to set up a glamorous camping resort. But he's really unskilled and doesn't know what he's doing, so Katie kind of takes over and tries to make it amazing, which she does. And then Demeter comes to the camp, and stuff happens. And it was fun, but I really felt like that much information on the cover did a disservice to this book, because I already knew what was going to happen up until pretty much the very end. Like, Demeter coming to camp is quite a bit in. I mean, we're talking right around like the halfway mark of the book. So you know everything up to the halfway mark of the book, which is one of the reasons I think I was struggling to get through it, because I couldn't really relate to Katie very much. I I'm a small town girl, so I don't get that, oh, London is the place to be and I want to be in London so bad. And the not being honest with her dad about what London life is really like. I kind of got that, but I kind of was like, he knows that things aren't going great in London, or he assumes. You'd have to as a parent. You won't let him see your apartment because it's always under renovation, because it's tiny and you sleep in a one tiny bedroom and you have awful roommates, you know? He's got to ask questions. He's not stupid. And there's some very negative things that he already has feelings about London. So you're not ruining London for him by being honest that your life in London is hard. And it is. You know, when people move to New York, I think they have similar things happen where, you know, it's expensive to live in New York, and it's expensive apparently to live in London. And so I guess what I'm saying is I just didn't always relate to Katie. I found her interesting, but I also didn't really fully understand her obsession with London, and maybe a little bit more of why would have been helpful, although, you know, people can want what they want. So I did like her and I liked her story. I was kind of bored in the beginning as we're waiting for her to go back to the farm and help her dad with the camping or glamping business. And I really struggled to be engaged, even though it was interesting, but I knew what was going to happen. Now, once we got back to the farm and Demeter shows up, that's when I think this book really takes off, really became a 4-star for me. You've got a lot of humor, of course. As it is indicated on the cover, Demeter's life is not so perfect either. And there's a lot of discussion in this book, which I think is important and amazing, about what we see, especially with social media, as being this perfect life, and then also what is not shown. Everybody's kind of putting their best foot forward on social media. Nobody is showing that their kids cried for 5 hours because they had the wrong color cup this morning and the whole day was ruined. Like, nobody puts that on social media for the most part. You're putting the happy kids at the park and the zoo and everybody's smiling and looking cute. And it's a really interesting discussion in here of our lives in reality versus our lives that we are trying to portray because of who we want to be, even if that's not reality. I did really end up liking Demeter. I think she was a complex character. I'm glad that they developed her so much when she comes to the farm, because I was really worried at the beginning that we weren't gonna really understand what makes Demeter tick, and especially because a lot of people in the beginning are really talking up Demeter and all the things that she's so good at, and she's amazing, and she has this history in marketing, and she's so smart. And we're really not seeing that in the beginning of the book. We're seeing her being kind of crappy. And I don't just mean crappy as in, you know, not great to Katie, but she also just doesn't seem like she knows what she's doing. She's not a very good boss. As a matter of fact, when she goes to fire Katie, she doesn't even know that she hasn't fired her yet. I mean, that's the kind of boss she's like, did I already tell you you're fired type thing? And it's like, oh my gosh. But I liked that we got to dig more into Demeter and find out what's going on with her. I liked the idea in this book about looking at what's real versus what's not and appreciating the in-between. I really loved Katie's relationship with her dad. I also have a dad who's a bit of a dreamer, and I can totally understand why Katie was sometimes frustrated with her dad, because he would start a project and then he didn't necessarily have the skills or the background, or was missing pieces of it, and so the projects wouldn't work. And so that's kind of one of the reasons she had to step in for this glamping thing, because the way her dad wanted to do it was not right. He doesn't have the skills. He has some skills. He's a great dreamer, and we do see that he has some great skills for this glamping stuff. But it's not the skills. He really needs Katie's skills to make this business boom. The ending didn't quite end how I wanted it to end, but I was okay with it. So I really thought things were going to go in a certain way, but they didn't, and I was okay with that. The only other thing I feel like I need to talk about is her love interest. I had such mixed feelings about that whole situation. There is this guy named Alex, and he works for the same company, and they start to have a bit of a romantic thing. And it's confusing because everybody's like, Alex is awful, but I never felt like we really got to see enough of Alex to make our own judgment calls of whether he and Katie can have a really good go at a relationship. Like, I just felt like there wasn't enough of them when it came to the concerns that people had about her dating him. And the way their relationship stuff resolved was kind of weird. I kind of didn't like it. It was fine. It was a little too cutesy maybe for me, and I didn't necessarily know that it was the answer to all the problems that we were having. So, I had some mixed feelings about the relationship, but overall, I liked this book. I liked the message. I liked Katie. I liked her family. I liked Demeter, and I liked how things turned out with the Katie Demeter storyline. The Katie and Alex storyline was fine. Overall, it was a good book. It was definitely above average. The writing was fun. It was not as humorous as I think I really wanted, which is one of the reasons I gave it a 4 instead of a 5. I felt like this could have been so much more funny. I think also just this is a personal thing. I'm almost 40 years old and Katie is in her like 20s. And I think that made it hard sometimes for me to relate to what she was going through because yes, I went through it before, but I have a much older perspective on things. And I think sometimes with Sophie Kinsella, that can happen, that her main characters are just so young. And if you're older, some of it, you just kind of want to be like, listen, here's some life experience. You're being stupid. And I a lot of times wanted to tell Katie that, especially in the first part of the book. And I think that's one of the reasons that the first part of this book, I was really struggling. I wasn't connecting to Katie. I was like, I already know stuff's going to happen, but it's all in the cover, and we're halfway through, and we're just now getting to camping. And yeah. So, overall, 4-star, did enjoy, but there were issues, and I definitely was at a 3-star prior to the second half of the book. So if you are picking this up, definitely try to push through the first part. Know that it does get really good, at least I thought, but also so much is given away in on the like cover that tells you what is happening, that it made for a rough read. I really think that did a disservice to the book, and I don't say that very often, but in this case I think it did. Alright guys, this has been Jane, and that has been my thoughts on My Not So Perfect Life. Please, if you've read the book, leave your thoughts below. Tell me if you enjoyed it more or less than I did. If you've read other Sophie Kinsellas, please tell me what your favorite one was. I think my favorite one, let me see if it's, my favorite one was one called 20s Girl. So, that is my favorite Sophie Kinsella. If you really like 20s Girl, and there's any that are really similar to 20s Girl, let me know, because I really enjoyed that one. My social media is below, as are a list of the books I have authored, if you'd like to check them out. This has been Jane. I'll see you next time. Bye.